We'll be introducing Mr. Mike Schultz and Mr. Scott Schultz. Mike and Scott Schultz are brothers who grew up on a farm in northwest Iowa, working hogs, cattle, corn, and soybeans. Due to high interest rates and lacking farming opportunities in the Midwest at the time, these two men were drawn to Delta Junction in 1982 for the Delta two-state land sale auction. Between the two of them, they have had many years of community service, including the school board, USDA, Farm Service Agency County, and state committees, the Salcha Delta Soil Water Conservation District, the Alaska Farmers Co-op, and the Farm Bureau. Both have raised their families here and are a big part of how Delta Junction became what it is today. They will be presenting two subjects this afternoon. The title of the first is Black Spruce to Yellow Grain, 44 Years of Sawmill Creek Agriculture Development. The title of the second is The Construction of the Alaska Highway from 1942 to 1943. Please welcome Mike and Scott Schultz.
Okay. Don't know what to expect, but hopefully you enjoy it. Mike has put a lot more time in on this than I have, but here we go on some of what's been going on the past few years.
Thank you for that introduction. It was nice. Okay. So one of the questions we always get is, how did you find out, how did you know that they were going to have a land sale back in 1982? So we were subscribed to a landowner magazine or newsletter, came out once a month or something. Anyway, so in April of 1981, yeah, that's it.
Did you go too fast?
Okay. So how do we know about it? Well, they had an article in this magazine, and they said at that time, November 1st, the Ag Action Council plans to sell another 32,000 acres to about 15 qualified lottery winners. It stated previously anticipated a raise of 50,000 acres, but decided to cut it back to 52,000.
Try the arrows.
Okay.
See if that. Got any thoughts, Eve?
It must be on the lake.
How about if I click on it? Okay. So one of the stories that goes along with this is that my wife Sandy convinced me that we were going to visit Alaska in the summer of 1981. We never made it to Delta Junction. We went on this trip and we came through Valdez and up to Glen Allen, then up to Toke, to Whitehorse, and back down, and so on. Well, but we heard about this land sale and that process, and then as well as this newsletter, and then Scott and I got interested in the land sale, and we came back to Delta Junction in November. At that time, then we came out with another issue of this Landowner magazine with more stories about this farming in Alaska. And inside they had a let's see. There we go. Take that one. Yes. So they had the article about Gene Thayer. He was going to, he was with Montana Merchandising of Great Falls, Montana. He was setting up the Alaska Grain Company here. And then in this insert, why there was a picture of Jim Lasley, his wife Kay. Kay Lasley started the Alaska magazine, which see the copy there. Yes. That's a picture of Al Bannon that was in this article. And next one, there's Mike Carlson. Yeah, that works, that little corner there. And the next thing that we were reading about was 31,000 acres. It said it was going to be a lottery. Residency was a requirement. It mentioned Point McKenzie. It mentioned 40,000 acres to be sold, the Delta 2 West portion of it, which did not happen. And it also mentioned 175,000 acres in Nenana was going to be sold in 1982 and 1983. And eventually 4 million acres would be sold for ag purposes. So we visited Delta Junction in November of '81, and we visited Dennis Green. And Scott jumped in the pickup with Dennis, and I was driving whatever rental car we had, and we went to see some of his equipment. We talked farming with Dennis, and some of you may recognize that truck. It was just not new at that time. Meanwhile, Scott had so in January is when Scott came up here to go about. Scott became a resident because that was a requirement. If you want to talk about that.
Yeah, it came up here in January and got my residency established, thinking that it was required, but the courts changed all that, and that went by the wayside. But once I got here to Delta, when we pulled in, it had some nice snows. Snow was everywhere. But then it turned 40 and 50 and 60 below, and I didn't get to do much poking around in the trees and visiting people like I thought. But Don had told me if it ever got up to 10 below, he'd take me out and fly me over the project. He got up 10 below, and I went into his office. We'll try it, no guarantees. He got his heaters out. He got me up in the air and we flew around for a little while.
And then as we got closer to the time of the auction, why then I came back up so we could both be at the land sale, and Don took me up. Also, he flew us over top of some land clearing that was going on at the time, and we got to see some bison. Somebody still don't know who it was, but that led up to the day of the auction. So March 13th, 1982, right here at the Delta School, here's the brochure for land sale. They were going to sell 15 tracts of land that day. Frank Melby was the auctioneer. He was the future director of the Division of Ag, worked for DNR at the time. A big crowd of people in this room that day. Some of you may remember some of those faces. Al Bannon sitting closest to the camera, Glenn Franklin standing there, Ed Robio, Ed Kern, picture. They were all there to conduct the land sale. And that's when we bought Track 5. The next day, we went out to Kurt Eaps' place. We thought maybe we better take a look at what we bought. So we got Kurt convinced to take us up in the plane.
Yeah, Kurt was gracious enough to get his plane going. It wasn't quite as cold then, so Mike jumped in with him and they got up in the air. And there's what we bought on the right-hand side of the dozer trail through the trees. That's where the road is now, the dozer trail, on the right-hand side there. So, yeah, a little bit of work ahead of us. Once we got done with trying to get all that paperwork taken care of, buying a place, well, then we started to figure out the contractor, and we went with Jerry Bremer as our contractor to start clearing, and that meant start with surveying work. Here's Ozzie Jensen and former mayor of Delta, David W. Musgrove, and Jerry Bremer in that picture, working at getting our survey lines cut in. Survey lines around the perimeter and then surveying all the windbreaks. And a picture of the anchor chain. Once the survey lines are done, they start chaining things down. And there's the rod berm rows making way for grain.
So, talking about markets a little bit, you'll hear more about markets as we work our way through this. So the markets that were available to new landowners that day, they talked about the red meat industry, slaughter facility had not been built yet, but it was going to be built. The dairy farms either were sold or were going to be sold. So we knew that dairy farms were coming at Point McKenzie. And then the export market. So the state was going to build a facility at Seward, and the city of Valdez, not to be outdone, passed a bond issue, went into debt so that they could build a facility at Valdez to handle the grain that was going to be produced here at Delta Junction. In 1983, Bill Sheffield becomes governor, January, and he promptly canceled construction of the Seward grain terminal. We still had the Valdez grain terminal. It still stands there today. I understand it has never handled so much as one truckload of grain, but it stands there. So we planted our 1983 crop.
Yeah, all the challenges that went with it, but we got our first crop in, and back then we didn't have any weeds to deal with, so summertime weed spraying, we got to our first crop and started in. Where remember it, we did our own drying, and I think the first September our grain bins showed up. So we got to assemble our grain bins and drying system and get the electrical all hooked up before we could start harvesting. Back in those years, we saw some in that last picture, but I saw where it was going. Fields of green.
So that summer we built buildings, we built grain bins. Years followed, we built more buildings. Back to the discussion about markets. All the grain sales were in-state. Straw sales became important to us. Cobuck Feed and Fuel was making dog food. They used hulless barley in that dog food they were making, so we did raise a certain amount of hulless barley for that purpose. And through the 80s, we marketed grain to whatever the market was. And I must say that, backing up just a little bit, when we grew that first crop, we got done harvesting in October, and we thought, well, it'd be nice to sell a load of grain, and we called everyone we could think of that might be a buyer. We couldn't sell one semi-load of grain. That's the way markets were at that time. So these pictures are just a straw baling because we found that straw was important to us as far as additional markets. So moving on then to the discussion of berm rows and land cleanup. We saw these berm rows as a big problem. It was like the guy that was talking about out on the bison range. They're working on berm rows out there. We had a whole bunch of these to get rid of. We didn't quite know how. Of course, everyone knew how to burn, so we did burning and then consolidating, and that's where a lot of the cleanup work stopped there. It was hard to get rid of the rest of those berm rows. So how to complete the land clearing process, how to get rid of berm rows? Well, the solution was build some equipment. So we knew we had a crawler and we knew how to spread that mess out. We had a type of hydraulic powered root rake, and we could rake through that mess and rake all the sticks off to the side. And then we built a root picker, a stick picker. So we worked with Jack Morris one winter, and that machine is all hydraulic drive. It sorted the sticks from the dirt, the ash. It elevated it into a 10-yard hopper on the back of the machine. So we drive until that was full, dump it, and we had a whole series of small round piles across the field. It was easy to light them, burn them up, and get rid of the burn rows. So talking about cleanup work, Track 5 had about 72 miles of burn row on it. Neighbors saw what we were doing, they wanted cleanup work done. We kept track for a few years, and somewhere around 14,000 acres were cleaned up in the 1990s with this equipment. Best ground on the farm was left in rows, resulting in the burn row effect. Yields on the burn rows could be double compared to the rest of the field. So the big question became how to duplicate this effect on other acres. We discussed that with university and research people for many years. We had different ideas. This is a picture of the burn row effect that you can still see 30 and 40 years after clearing. It's still there today. Another picture of what the burn rows are. Someone had the idea of adding lime, changing the pH might be beneficial. So a few years ago, that was one experiment. There's another trial underway currently using charcoal to study the yield increase, trying to duplicate the burn row effect. How how to increase those yields. So moving on, 1995 was a big year for grain production. Yields were good, markets were limited. Unsold grain tonnage was growing. So the solution was export grain, import feeder cattle. So 1996, with the help of Ken Sherwood, we lined up a sale of some barley. This is a picture when we were loading a rail car. We hauled the grain from Delta up there to Moose Creek. And, we loaded 2 rail cars, not at the same time, but at different times. So 100 tons of barley in a rail car took 4 semi-loads to load it. One of the cars was this car. The way I understand it, at one time the state owned 20 of these cars. 18 of them were sold when they canceled the export facility at Seward, but they kept 2 of them, and they're still in circulation today, the way I understand it. So, in addition to exporting some barley, we bought 5 loads of feeder cattle from Canada. Before we did this, and we checked with the manager at the Palmer Meat Plant and encouraged us and assured us that we'd get them processed. And that was at the Farm Forum. He was up here, Frank Huffman was up here that year, and we talked about this. So, thinking that we had a good market for those, why we proceeded, bought the feeder cattle. We partnered with some other people that had facilities. That's Jerry Marlowe. We partnered with Scott Miller and Herb Simon. We furnished the feeder cattle and the feed. They furnished the facilities and the labor, and then we split up the sales when that time came. Some of them were black and whites. Most of them were colors. And of course, the next part about that story is when it came time to market the cattle, it didn't go smooth at all. The slaughter plant in Palmer, they weren't ready to take cattle by the truckload. First thing, we bought them at different weights and so on, so they wouldn't all be ready for market at the same time. But come September, October, we wanted to sell some, and we got to process all these 4-H calves first, and yeah, maybe we can take care of 5 head next week. We ended up carrying quite a few of the cattle through the next winter, which it used up a lot of barley. Moving on then, 96, 97, and 98 were the dry years. In some cases, yields were under half a ton to the acre. Most straw came out behind the combine. The only good yield was on the durum mills. Other problems that we had were grasshoppers, bison. What years were that, Scott?
Oh,
86.
86, and I think it was every other year for a while. 86, 88, 90, 92. I don't know if it extended beyond that or not. But yeah, there was no chemical in state, so in 86 we were late getting the chemical shipped in. Thurngers drove down to Anchorage to get it picked up. It was flown in on Flying Tigers, if I remember right. They picked it up, brought it up here. Harvey Wheeler got some extra work that way, spraying for grasshoppers. It was all standing grain, so Harvey was out there doing a lot of flying, trying to kill the grasshoppers.
And it worked.
Yeah, there's a lot of dead grasshoppers laying on the ground. Sometimes you'd go out there and you couldn't identify grasshoppers, but there was something laying in the drill mark tracks. You get down on your hands and knees, and it was the legs of the grasshoppers that were laying there. The rest of the body had been eaten. They were cannibalizing. That was the nice part about spraying 7. As they ate each other, they were infecting each other, and they kept dying off. And there was lots of grasshoppers. And then there's the furry critters. They always took their fair share. Solution to that, build some fences. So we started in on a project. We bought some supplies and brought them in and went to building fences. That was about a 10-year project to get the fence wrapped around the farm. How many miles we ended up with?
25 and a half.
About 25 and a half miles we built.
And 7
Contain
days.
things.
So back to talking about markets. So our quest for more markets, we added grass seed to the mix. And this was at the help and the encouragement of Pat Mulligan. We got to where we grew different grasses that were needed for re-veg work. And anyway, we learned a lot about growing them. First, we learned how to modify the drills a little bit to plant the stuff and to get it to grow, and modified combines to harvest the grass seed. We built seed dryer trucks that were needed to dry the seed, and we learned all about drying, how to dry the seed, how to best dry it, and it became part of our operation. So we love to talk about our problems here. Our next problem we're going to talk about was dust and mud and ruts. It was bad field roads. The solution was to gravel the roads. So we So, this is what our field roads looked like at one point. And of course, in the rain, then all that powder turned to blood. But we gathered up some equipment. We started screening gravel and loading gravel and hauling gravel and building roads and spreading gravel. We laid down fabric. Compacted the gravel, and we ended up with some nice looking field roads. It was a very good addition to the farm. Make sure I'm keeping up with my notes here. So in 2 years' time, we built about 9.5 miles of field road. Other crops that we grew over the years, canola, hay crops, buckwheat, winter rye, field peas, mulling barley, wheat, and also hullus barley. Picture of a field of canola at harvest time, hay crops, winter rye, we grew that crop 5 feet tall, field peas. So, talking about adding acres, so the state of Alaska, through DNR, Division of Land, and Division of Ag was selling repossessed farms in the years of 1989 through 99. So track 3, track U, and track N were adjoining farms that were added to the operation in those years. This picture, I didn't take this picture, it was sent to me, but this was the DNR land sale, January 28th of 1989 at the Delta School gym, again in the same room. It was 60 below that morning, and the people from Fairbanks all showed up, and anyone locally that wanted to buy a farm showed up, and they had their land sale that day. That's what, talking about that for just a second, that's when they sold the Korean tracks, I believe. I'm pretty sure, but when we refer to the Korean tracks, there was 3 tracks on the east side of the Harrison River that were called the Korean tracks, the Korean buyers, and the state repossessed them, and then they divided them up into either 640s or 160s, and so there was quite a few parcels that were sold that day, and some were sold a lottery system, and that's what that picture is. They were picking names or little balls or something out of for the lottery winners, and others were outcry auction. They had several different types of selling going on that day.
So you better identify the drawer.
Yeah, that was my son Benjamin here. They recruited him to pick the balls out of whatever that is, that basket that they wrote to. He was having fun. And so we've got we're going through this right along here. Fun photos. We've got a family.
Yeah, we had some buildings that didn't have complete closed in, so we were alternating great horned owls and great gray owls over several years. One year, and the next year. Once I finished the buildings, they moved on to other places.
Rainbows. Clouds. Oh, just some fun stuff you see when you're out in the field at harvest time, sunsets and harvest photos. And a couple of things, of course, you never have enough time to gather up everything that you'd like to, but we finally got electricity here about a year ago out at the farm, 3-phase power. So that was important to add that was an improvement. We'd operated through the drying season where I operated the generators to provide power for all the equipment that we needed to. And going to the fun spring planting season, picture of that. That's it.
That's about it.
Well, that's up to you. How are we
Is
doing
that your
on,
second one?
yeah, how are we doing on time?
About 10 minutes.
Yeah, you mean 10 minutes to go? Okay. Okay. 10 minutes it is?
There's that history of Glasgow
You tell him when the
Highway.
time's
That's
up.
what we want.
Yep.
You tell him when the time's up.
I don't know if there's any questions while Eve is pulling up the second presentation. Megan's got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So I'm just curious, what's the best piece of advice you can offer to a new farmer?
Okay, and I gladly answer that. And that is, yeah, excuse me for not using the mic. The question is what best piece of advice? And so before you buy a farm or do anything, know where your market is. Before you produce anything, whether it's a crop or anything you're going to do, know where that market is. It's that simple. So this next thing, I just thought maybe some people might be interested in this. It's a little bit about the Alaska Highway and the Grizzly River Bridge and so on. So we're going to run through these as fast as we can. So we're going to start with go around the corner. We're going to start with a question. Who was Ralph Green? It had nothing to do with the Dennis Green family. It has nothing to do with the Green magazine, which I like to read. Ralph Green was born in 1900, north of Sanborn, Iowa. Scott and I grew up around the little town of Malvern, Iowa. Ralph Green was born about 7 miles away. We didn't know that until recent years. But anyway, he started, as his obituary says, he started his construction career in 1920 using a mule-drawn wagon. He hauled gravel for a road project near Sheldon, Iowa. In 1942, his Green Construction Company, based in Des Moines, worked on the Elkhorn Highway. In his memoir, he wrote that his company built 342 of the highway's toughest miles. And when he came to Alaska, he brought with him the Iowa boys, and that means 17 other subcontractors that built the Alaska Highway. And most of what I'm going to show you are pictures taken from this book, and I got to give this guy credit for an excellent book. This is Duesenberg. He's from Clear Lake, Iowa. His grandfather and his father and his uncle were all part of that construction company. And they were one of the 17 that I mentioned that came to Alaska. So Lytle and Green Construction, two different companies, one out of Sioux City, one out of Des Moines, Iowa. They were here in the summer of 41. Ralph Green built the big Delta airstrip in the summer of 41. I'd like people to help me understand just where the big Delta airstrip was also. And then, so he came back in 1942, built the Alaska Highway. So December 41 is when the Japs bombed Pearl Harbor, and so on. So by summer of 42, the government had decided to build the Alaska Highway. And these two construction companies, Lytle and Green, built the Alaska portion of it, 308 miles, plus they also went down into Canada about 50 miles. The rest of the highway on down to Dawson Creek, that was built by Canadian contractors. And this is a list in the back of the book of the 17 subcontractors and mentioned here, or listed here, are Graves Construction out of Malvern, Iowa. They were a bridge builder, and Osterman Construction from Ocheyedan, Iowa, which is 15 miles away. They were a road builder contractor. And so the reason that, I'm repeating myself, Lytle and Green had been here the year before. That's why government then through the Civil Aeronautics, there it is. Lytle and Green were here in 41 working for the Civil Aeronautics Administration to build these airports in Alaska. That's why they were in position to be awarded the contract to manage the Alaska portion of the Alaska Highway. This is a picture of some of the contractors. Bill Graves is in the back row, second from the left. Hans Osterman is son of Gus Osterman, is the second row, first on the left. That's a picture of Ken Graves. He's the bridge builder from Malvern, Iowa. That's Gus Osterman. These are all pictures in this book. I referred to the Duesenberg's book. This gets interesting here. I would like some help knowing exactly where that picture was taken. I remember this is 1942. This is right outside of Big Delta, or it's called Buffalo Center then. And look at the cleared field in the background. Look at that nice fence. These fellas here landed at the Big Delta airstrip. This is, I'm quoting out of this book because the guy that wrote the book, he went around to a lot of the people that he interviewed, and they still, people that were up here working wrote letters back home, and the family saved the letters and so on, so he was quoting the letters. So these people came, they landed at the Big Delta airstrip, the plane left. They waited anxiously. It says at the Buffalo Center drop-off site, they were waiting to be trucked to their headquarters down in Gulkana. This Don Garlick, one of the fellows there, they dumped us out near Big Delta, and if I ever had a lonesome and disgusted feeling, it was there. 143 of us were left with nothing to eat and no way to get out of there. Warren Duesenberg received a letter from the returned pilot that the men were without proper food or shelter in Alaska. Now Dan Osterman is sitting in this picture, and he's the three people out on the front there off to the right. He was a 16-year-old kid. His dad was the contractor, and he pulled him out of school and said, "Yep, you're on your way to Alaska." And they flew from Edmonton they sat down in Whitehorse in a cargo plane. They didn't have seats in them. They were sitting on this luggage on their way from Whitehorse on up here to Big Delta. And that's where they dumped them out there. And this is what Dan Osterman had to say. Upon arrival at Big Delta, nobody was there. No one knew anything. Sitting around for 24 hours with nothing to eat didn't seem quite so bad since it never got dark. And the Army finally took pity and gave everyone a big corned beef sandwich. It was delicious, but no one realized at the time that canned corned beef from Argentina would be the only meat to be served breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the next 6 weeks. And like I said, I would like someone to, not right now, but help figure out where that was. Over top of this guy with a large hat, I'm sure is Don Lincoln in that picture. And anyway, we need to figure out where that was. So their headquarters was at Gulkana. That's what that picture is. And so these 17 contractors, they sent 2 of them from Gulkana with their equipment and everything up to Big Delta or Buffalo Center. Osterman was the road contractor. He headed east towards Stowe, pioneering through the trees. And Graves Construction followed him until they got to the Gristle River, and that's where Graves stopped. They set up their camp. They built the first bridge across the Gristle River, a wood bridge, in the summer of '42, then came back in '43 and built the structure that is there today. This is a picture of pioneering through the trees. Some pictures of the Richardson Highway down by Valdez. There was no Richardson Highway, it was the Valdez Trail back then. There were no bridges across. They either hauled or drove their cats to where they needed to go. One of the stories that Kenneth Graves had was that his equipment came into Valdez. Every time they came across one of those little rivers, they had to unload the cat, pull the truck and lowboy across the river, reload the cat, and go on until they encountered the next river. There were no bridges back then. And when it came time to move their camp, this was the start of the Alaska Highway, where they hooked onto the cook shack and drag it down the road to where their next camp was going to be. There's the Osterman camp somewhere along the highway. They had lots of trouble. Lots of equipment broke down. Lots of equipment got stuck out in the rivers. More equipment stuck out in the rivers. Now, this is what they built first. They called this a trestle. And they did that so they could get across the river. This is the Gristle River. And then they built a wood structure that more resembled a bridge. This is summer of '42. This one here is the picture is the Johnson River. Oh, that's the yeah. What that's showing there, it is the Johnson River. It's a cable trolley. That's what these guys are on. It is a cable trolley. It enabled workers to cross the river before the trestle could be completed. Now, they're driving, it's a pile driver, and what they're driving, this is up in Tanana River, north of Delta here, they're using rails that were salvaged from Chittenden. So they went down to Chittenden, tore up those rails and pounded them in, and there'll be another picture here of the cement structure that's underneath the Gristle River Bridge. They used rails for rebar in those structures. And then, if they wanted to go to Fairbanks, this is the cable-operated ferry that they used to cross the Tanana River until a trestle could be built. And they had a lot of fun. They stuck. Now, this picture, it's another cat that got stuck, but I want to talk about that for a minute because, as you'll notice, there's some black workers in this picture. And the point is here that there probably was no black workers on the Gristle River Bridge or up at this end of the highway. The 97th Engineer Regiment was based at Salina. And they mostly worked from Tok to the border. So, back to talking about Lytle and Green, together with 18 contractors, were called the Iowa Expeditionary Force, together with the Army Corps of Engineers, the 97th Regiment, built the Alaska Highway from the Canadian border to what is now Delta Junction. From the Lytle and Green base at Gakona, contractors moved to Tok and worked both east and west. Osterman and Graves went to Buffalo Center to start, worked to the east towards Tok. Graves Construction, the bridge builder would follow Osterman and set up their camp. Their meeting point was Robertson River. The contractors working from the west to the east met up with contractors working from Tok west towards Delta Junction. They met up at the Robertson River, and they called it a Golden Spike event. A picture of some truck dropping through a wood bridge. So this is the convoy that finally made it all the way up the Alaska Highway, November 20th, 1942. That was considered the first convoy that made it all the way across the bridges and so on. That winter was a hard winter. When they came back, these guys came back in the spring when they needed to start work again. They're standing on the hood of the cat that's out in the Ursa River. I don't know. Anyway, more stuck equipment. A lot of that. Truck tipped over, went through the ice. So spring of '43, things started to thaw out. It was a mess, as you might expect. Moving on here, so that picture there of the west abutment of the Ursa River. The upper picture is the temporary trestle on the Robertson River, and the lower right is the Graves Brothers office. So lower left, that's Bill Graves. The lower right picture is the concrete pier in the Ursa River that used rails from Chitna for rebar. So there would have been 9 or 10 of those that were constructed to hold up the bridge. It's a picture of the Robinson, which we've been debating if that was the finished product or not. It's pretty narrow. This is a picture of the Johnson River, spanned with 4 200-foot spans, 160-foot span. Big Ursa River, when it was completed. Gravel crushing crew. So that picture is of the Ursa River. I took that picture a couple years ago. So back in 1992, 50 years anniversary of the Alaska Highway and building of it. Kenneth Graves brought his family to Delta Junction. He wanted to show them. So they came here. The Pioneers Club put on a dinner for them. You can see Nick Colombo, Fran Colombo in the picture there. Afterwards, Scott and I lined up the Paul Nisler with he had a nice bus. We had Frank Geiger there. Frank was the chief storyteller. And they wanted to see our farm, so we toured the farm. And then we ended up down at the Ursa River Bridge. And Kenneth and his 2 sons, Jerry and Tom, they stopped and looked at the deck, and they said that was the same deck that they poured in 1943 that it's still there today. That was the original deck on that bridge. And that's the Graves family. So this slide tells how that company was started, and it says that in 1942, Bill and his son Kenneth took the company equipment and personnel to Alaska for major structure work on the Alcan Highway. Today it's based in Spencer, Iowa. Still a going concern. They tell me that if you walk in their office, there is a big picture on the wall of the Ursa River Bridge. They're still proud of what they built. Now, the state of Alaska is now advertising the Ursa Bridge to be given away. As you've read on, if you pay attention to that, it's been on the radio. There's a picture of the Ursa River Bridge. couple of things to mention about the Bristol River Bridge. The way I understand it, the lead engineer for the new bridge is a Delta Greeley School District graduate, Scott Schultz, chief engineer there on that project. Works with the DOT. The other thing, I don't want to get political, but if you read Tim Bradner's report this week, I don't know how they're going to build that new bridge, because right now the state can't even come up with their 10%. All these highway projects, the bridges, the passing lane, whatever they're building, the federal government comes along with 90% of the money to do all that. The state of Alaska only has to come up with 10%. And it's not even in the budget this year. Anyway, that's enough on that. So, I guess a couple of points. I know also, I invited Tim Ellis to be here today. Tim has the segments on the radio. Tim's been saying the bridge was built in 1944. The bridge was built in 1943, according to Kenneth Graves. He was here, he built the bridge. He says it was 43. So I was going to give Tim a few things for future segments that he can look into.
That's good.
How are you doing?
We've got a break, so enjoy some more snacks and stuff. Socialize a little bit.